Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood in the hangar bay of the Alliance Defense Station, watching her fellow pilots snicker behind their hands as she walked toward her assigned fighter. The sleek alien vessels gleamed under the artificial lights, their exotic curves and glowing energy cores marking them as top-tier technology from across the galaxy. Vorthan plasma fighters with their spiral wings, Zilani crystal interceptors that hummed with psychic energy, and the massive Korath heavy bombers that looked like flying fortresses. Then there was her ship. "Seriously, Chen?" called out Lieutenant Vex, a purple-skinned Altarian whose own fighter could phase through solid matter. "They're giving you that ancient human rust bucket? I thought Command was joking when they assigned you to the squadron." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept walking toward the fighter that had been gathering dust in the corner of the hangar for months. The ship looked nothing like the graceful alien craft surrounding it. Angular, dark gray, and utilitarian, it resembled a predatory bird more than a work of art. Most of the other pilots couldn't even pronounce its name correctly. "It's called a Ghosthawk," she said quietly, running her hand along the matte black hull. "And it's not rust. It's stealth coating." A chorus of laughter erupted from the group behind her. "Stealth coating?" wheezed Pilot Zarn, a four-armed Hectory whose own ship could generate shields that reflected energy weapons. "Human, your primitive technology stopped being relevant the moment you joined the Alliance. That thing probably can't even break light speed without falling apart." Sarah bit back her response. These pilots had years of experience with technology that Earth scientists could barely comprehend. The Altarians had been spacefaring for millennia. The Zilani could manipulate matter with their minds. The Korath had conquered half their galaxy before the Alliance formed. What did humans bring to the table except stubbornness and outdated military hardware? Commander Thex, a tall insectoid Mantari, clicked his mandibles disapprovingly as he approached the group. His compound eyes fixed on Sarah with something that might have been pity. "Pilot Chen, are you certain you wish to fly that vessel? I could speak with the quartermaster about finding you something more suitable. Perhaps a training fighter." The suggestion stung worse than the mockery. Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked the commander directly in his multifaceted eyes. "Sir, I trained on this class of fighter for 6 years before joining the Alliance. I know every bolt, wire, and system. I can fly it better than anything else in this hangar." "But can you fight in it?" asked Pilot Nira, a graceful Zilani whose lavender skin seemed to shimmer in the light. Her voice carried genuine curiosity rather than malice. "The specifications we've seen suggest human fighters lack proper shielding. Their weapons are kinetic rather than energy-based, and their maneuverability is limited by the physical constraints of your species." Sarah wanted to argue, but the facts were hard to dispute. Human technology did seem primitive compared to what the Alliance offered. Earth had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago, and most human pilots had gladly traded up to alien fighters with their superior capabilities. The Ghosthawk program had been all but abandoned. "The mission briefing starts in 10 minutes, Commander Thex announced. "We'll be escorting a diplomatic convoy through the neutral zone. Intelligence suggests minimal resistance, but we must be prepared for anything." "Pilot Chen, I trust your unique fighter won't slow down the formation?" "No, sir," Sarah replied, though she could hear the doubt in her own voice. As the other pilots dispersed to prepare their ships, Sarah climbed into the Ghosthawk's cockpit. The interior was cramped compared to the spacious alien fighters, all harsh angles and exposed components. No holographic displays or neural interfaces, just old-fashioned switches, gauges, and screens. She strapped herself into the uncomfortable ejection seat and began her pre-flight checklist. The other pilots were right about one thing. The Ghosthawk was primitive. Its fusion reactor was a fraction the size of an Altarian power core. Its weapons were simple railguns and missile pods instead of exotic particle beams. It couldn't phase through matter, manipulate gravity, or generate impenetrable shields. But as Sarah's hands moved across the familiar controls, she felt something the other pilots might not understand. This ship wasn't just a machine to her. It was an extension of her will. Every system responded to her touch like a musical instrument in the hands of a master. The engine's vibration, the subtle feedback through the controls, the way the ship wanted to move. She knew it all instinctively. The hangar bay doors opened, revealing the star-filled void beyond. One by one, the alien fighters lifted off with graceful movements, their advanced propulsion systems making barely a sound. Sarah watched them form up in perfect formation, their ship's computer systems automatically coordinating their positions. When her turn came, the Ghosthawk roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder. The other pilots probably thought it was crude and noisy. Sarah smiled. Humans had always believed that power should announce itself. She guided the fighter out of the hangar and took her position at the rear of the formation. Through her comms, she could hear the casual chatter of her squad mates discussing their superior technology and sharing jokes about primitive human engineering. None of them seemed particularly worried about the mission ahead. As they entered hyperspace, Sarah caught sight of their destination on her navigation display. The neutral zone was a stretch of space between Alliance territory and the hostile Ravager Empire. According to intelligence, it should be empty except for the diplomatic convoy they were escorting. But Sarah had learned during her years in Earth's military that intelligence was often wrong. And when it was wrong, superior technology meant nothing if you weren't ready for a real fight. She checked her weapons systems one more time and settled back in her seat. Around her, the universe stretched and twisted as they hurtled through hyperspace toward what everyone assumed would be a routine escort mission. Sarah Chen had a feeling it was going to be anything but routine. The diplomatic convoy materialized in normal space like a collection of floating palaces. 3 massive ships, each one a masterpiece of Alliance engineering, drifted in formation near the edge of the neutral zone. Their hulls gleamed with ceremonial decorations and energy shields that painted rainbow patterns across their surfaces. Sarah had never seen vessels quite so beautiful or quite so vulnerable. Escort formation, establish perimeter. Commander Thex's voice crackled through the comm system. Maintain standard patrol pattern. Sensors show all clear. Sarah watched her squad mates spread out around the convoy, their advanced fighters taking elegant positions that showcased their superior maneuverability. Lieutenant Vex's Altarian fighter phased in and out of visibility as he tested his ship's quantum displacement systems. Pilot Zarn's Hectory bomber performed a complex spiral that would have been impossible for any human-built craft. The Ghosthawk took its assigned position at the convoy's rear, following the formation like an ugly duckling, trailing a flock of swans. Sarah tried to ignore the casual dismissal in her squad mates' voices as they reported their status. To them, she was just dead weight, an obsolete piece of hardware dragged along out of some misguided sense of inclusivity. Sensors are clean, reported pilot Nira from her Zilani interceptor. The psychic pilot's ship seemed to dance through space, responding to her thoughts rather than crude mechanical controls. No signs of Ravager activity. This should be a peaceful run. Sarah frowned at her own sensor displays. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't put her finger on what. The Ghosthawk's detection systems were primitive compared to the others, relying on basic electromagnetic and gravitational sensors instead of quantum resonance scanners or psychic detection arrays. But sometimes primitive had advantages. "Commander?" Sarah called over the comm. "I'm getting some unusual readings on the long-range sensors. Might be nothing, but there's a faint electromagnetic signature at the edge of detection range." "Pilot Chen, your sensors are decades out of date," Commander Thex replied with barely concealed irritation. "Pilot Nira's psychic scans would have detected any hostile presence long before your equipment. Maintain position and radio silence unless you have something substantive to report." The rebuke stung, but Sarah kept monitoring her displays. Years of training had taught her to trust her instincts even when everyone else disagreed. The electromagnetic signature was weak, almost lost in the background radiation of space, but it had a pattern to it. A rhythm that seemed artificial. 20 minutes into the escort mission, Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. Space around the convoy erupted in flashes of twisted light as a dozen Ravager ships dropped out of stealth mode. The enemy vessels were nightmarish things, all sharp edges and organic curves that hurt to look at directly. They had been hiding in plain sight, using some kind of advanced cloaking technology that the Alliance sensors couldn't detect. "Ambush," Commander Thex's voice cut through the comm channels. "All fighters engage immediately. Protect the convoy." The battle began with devastating intensity. Ravager plasma cannons lit up the void as they opened fire on the diplomatic ships. The convoy's shields held for now, but Sarah could see them flickering under the assault. Her squad mates responded with professional efficiency, their advanced fighters dancing through space to return fire. Lieutenant Vex phased his ship in and out of reality, appearing behind enemy fighters to rake them with particle beams before vanishing again. Pilot Zarn's heavy bomber unleashed devastating volleys of gravity torpedoes that warped space itself. Pilot Nira's interceptor moved like liquid starlight, her psychic abilities letting her anticipate enemy movements before they happened. But for all their technological superiority, Sarah could see they were outmatched. The Ravagers had planned this ambush perfectly, bringing overwhelming numbers and positioning themselves to catch the escort formation off guard. Every time one of her squad mates scored a hit, 2 more enemy ships seemed to take its place. Chen, stay back and protect the convoy, Commander Thex ordered as his own fighter spiraled away from a Ravager interceptor, trailing atmosphere from a hull breach. Your ship isn't equipped for this kind of fight. Sarah gritted her teeth and ignored the order. She could see what the others couldn't. The Ravagers weren't just trying to destroy the convoy. They were hurting it, using their attack pattern to force the diplomatic ships toward a specific point in space. Whatever they had planned, Sarah was pretty sure it was worse than just blowing up some ambassadors. The Ghosthawk roared forward into the battle, its primitive fusion engine pushing it faster than anyone expected. Sarah's hands flew across the manual controls, making minute adjustments that no computer could calculate. The other pilots fought like dancers, graceful and precise. Sarah fought like a predator, all sharp angles and sudden movements that confused enemy targeting systems. Her first target was a Ravager scout ship that was marking positions for the larger vessels. The alien craft's pilot clearly expected the human fighter to behave like the other Alliance ships. Elegant, predictable, bound by computer-assisted flight patterns. Instead, Sarah yanked the Ghosthawk into a savage turn that would have killed most alien pilots, using the ship's robust human engineering to pull maneuvers that stressed the hull beyond safe limits. The Ravager scout never saw the railgun rounds coming. Unlike energy weapons that announced their approach with bright beams and charged particles, the Ghosthawk's kinetic weapons were invisible until impact. Tungsten slugs traveling at a significant fraction of light speed punched through the enemy ship's shields like they weren't there, turning sophisticated alien technology into expanding clouds of debris. How did she do that? Pilot Nira's voice carried a note of shock. Her ship shouldn't be able to maneuver like that. Sarah was already moving to her next target, a Ravager heavy cruiser that was concentrating fire on the lead diplomatic ship. The enemy vessel was massive compared to her fighter, bristling with weapons that could vaporize the Ghosthawk in seconds. But it was also slow and dependent on its shields for protection. Chen, get out of there, Commander Thex shouted. That cruiser will tear you apart. Sarah smiled grimly and armed her missile pods. The Ghosthawk carried old-fashioned nuclear warheads instead of exotic matter torpedoes or quantum disruptors. The other pilots thought that made them inferior. Sarah thought it made them surprising. She dove toward the Ravager cruiser at an angle that brought her in under its main weapon systems, using the ship's own bulk to shield her approach. The enemy clearly thought she was either insane or incompetent. What kind of pilot flew directly at a capital ship? The kind who knew that sometimes the best technology was the kind your enemy didn't understand. The nuclear warhead detonated against the Ravager cruiser's hull in a brilliant flash that temporarily overwhelmed every sensor in the battle zone. When the radiation cleared, a massive section of the enemy ship's armor had been vaporized, exposing critical systems to space. The cruiser listed heavily, its weapons falling silent as emergency power systems struggled to compensate for the damage. Impossible, whispered Pilot Zarn over the comm. How did primitive explosives penetrate their shields? Sarah was already banking away from the crippled cruiser, but she took a moment to answer. Nuclear weapons don't care about energy shields. They're not energy. They're matter converting directly to energy. The shields were designed to stop particle beams and plasma bolts, not raw fusion reactions. She could hear the stunned silence from her squad mates as they processed this information. For all their advanced technology, they had forgotten one of the fundamental rules of warfare. Sometimes the old ways worked because people stopped preparing for them. But Sarah didn't have time to enjoy their surprise. Her tactical display showed the real problem developing at the edge of the battle zone. While the Ravagers kept the escort fighters busy with their frontal assault, a second group of enemy ships was moving into position behind the convoy. These weren't standard attack craft. They were some kind of specialized vessel she didn't recognize. Commander, we've got bigger problems, Sarah reported, transmitting her sensor data. Unknown Ravager ships approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV. They're not engaging, just positioning themselves. Commander Thex's voice was strained as he replied. His fighter had taken heavy damage, and Sarah could see atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. "Confirmed, Chen, but we can't break off to intercept. These fighters are barely holding the main force." Sarah studied the tactical situation and felt her blood run cold. The unknown ships were arranged in a perfect sphere around a specific point in space, exactly where the convoy would be in another 10 minutes if the Ravagers succeeded in herding them along their current path. Whatever the enemy had planned, it required the diplomatic ships to be in a precise location. "I'm going after them," Sarah announced, already turning the Ghosthawk toward the mysterious vessels. "Negative," Commander Thex barked. "Chen, your fighter can't handle a solo run against unknown hostiles. Stay with the formation." "Sir, with respect, my fighter is the only one that can handle this," Sarah replied, pushing the Ghosthawk's engine past recommended limits. "Those ships are clearly specialized for whatever they're planning. They won't be expecting a frontal assault from obsolete human technology." She cut the comm channel before the commander could order her to stand down. Sarah knew she was violating direct orders, but sometimes being right was more important than being obedient. Her squadmates were fighting brilliantly with their superior ships, but they were thinking like Alliance pilots, all precision and technological advantage. The Ravagers were counting on that. The unknown enemy ships came into visual range as Sarah approached at maximum velocity. They were unlike anything in the intelligence databases, sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves, covered in what looked like organic protrusions that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. As she watched, the protrusions began to extend outward, reaching toward each other across the void. "Oh hell," Sarah muttered, understanding flooding through her. "They're building something." The organic extensions were connecting ship to ship, forming a complex geometric pattern in space. Energy was beginning to flow between the vessels, building toward some kind of massive discharge. Sarah had seen similar technology in classified reports, experimental weapons that could tear holes in space itself. If the Ravagers completed their construction, they could open a portal directly into Alliance space, bypassing every defense and delivering a full invasion force. Sarah armed every weapon the Ghosthawk carried and dove toward the center of the formation. The enemy ships detected her approach, but their reaction was sluggish. They had committed their power to the construction project and couldn't quickly shift to defensive systems. More importantly, they clearly hadn't expected to face a human fighter. The first ship she targeted tried to bring its shields online, but Sarah's railgun rounds punched through the partially formed barrier before it could stabilize. The tungsten slugs shredded the organic protrusions, severing the energy connection and sending feedback surges through the entire network. Two more ships turned to engage her, their weapon systems finally coming online. Sarah found herself flying through a maze of plasma bolts and exotic energy beams, the Ghosthawk's hull heating dangerously as near misses washed over her fighter. But the enemy pilots were making a crucial mistake. They were trying to target her with computer-guided weapons designed for predictable flight patterns. Sarah flew like a madwoman, throwing the Ghosthawk through impossible maneuvers that stressed every joint and rivet in the hull. She pulled turns that would have crushed most alien pilots, using Earth's higher gravity as an advantage for the first time since joining the Alliance. The Ravager targeting systems couldn't compensate for flight patterns that violated their understanding of safe aerospace engineering. A plasma bolt clipped her port wing, sending damage reports cascading across her displays. Sarah ignored them and lined up on another enemy ship, this one desperately trying to disconnect from the organic network before she could reach it. Her missile pod spoke again, sending 2 nuclear warheads streaking across the void. The explosions were spectacular, completely vaporizing the target ship and sending electromagnetic pulses through the surrounding vessels. Half the network went dark as systems overloaded, and the geometric pattern began to collapse. But Sarah wasn't done. The remaining ships were trying to salvage their operation, redirecting power to create a smaller portal that might still allow some Ravager forces through. She could see space beginning to warp around their formation, reality bending as massive energies built toward critical mass. "Not today," Sarah growled, turning the Ghosthawk toward the center of the formation. She had 1 warhead left, but getting close enough to use it would mean flying directly into the energy field the Ravagers were generating. Her instruments were already going haywire from the exotic radiation, and she could feel the ship's hull beginning to vibrate as space itself became unstable around her. Behind her, Sarah could hear frantic voices on the comm channels as her squad mates finally realized what she was attempting, but their ships were still engaged with the main Ravager force, and even if they could break free, their advanced technology would be more vulnerable to the portal's effects than her primitive fighter. Sarah Chen had trained for 6 years to fly the Ghosthawk, but she had trained her entire life to be human. And sometimes being human meant doing something completely insane, because it was the only way to save everyone else. The energy field around the portal construction hit the Ghosthawk like a physical blow. Sarah felt the fighter shudder as exotic forces washed over the hull, and her instruments flickered between normal readings and complete chaos. The ship's primitive systems, ironically, handled the interference better than the sophisticated Alliance technology would have. There simply wasn't enough advanced circuitry to be disrupted. "Chen, your ship is breaking apart." Pilot Nira's voice crackled through the static. "The energy readings are off the charts." Sarah could see the truth of that statement in her damage reports. The Ghosthawk's hull was developing stress fractures, as space itself warped around her, and several secondary systems had already failed. But the fusion reactor was still running. The weapons were still functional, and the flight controls still responded to her touch. That was all she needed. The remaining Ravager ships had formed a tight circle, their organic protrusions reaching desperately toward each other as they tried to complete their portal before the human fighter could interfere. Energy arced between the vessels in brilliant displays of purple and gold, and Sarah could see the fabric of space beginning to tear at the center of their formation. She armed her last nuclear warhead and set it for maximum yield. The missile would have to penetrate the energy field, reach the center of the formation, and detonate at precisely the right moment to disrupt the portal. And she would have to get close enough to ensure the warhead could punch through whatever defenses the Ravagers had left. "Warning, hull integrity at 60% and falling," the Ghosthawk's computer announced in its calm, synthetic voice. "Recommend immediate withdrawal from energy field." "Noted," Sarah replied through gritted teeth, pushing the fighter deeper into the chaos. The Ravager ships finally noticed her approach and tried to target her with their remaining weapons, but the energy field that was tearing her ship apart was also disrupting their targeting systems. Plasma bolts went wide, and exotic particle beams curved away as space itself bent around the portal construction. Sarah lined up her shot and fired the nuclear missile at point-blank range. The warhead streaked toward the center of the Ravager formation, its simple guidance system completely unaffected by the exotic energies that would have confused more sophisticated targeting systems. But as the missile approached its target, something unexpected happened. The partially formed portal began to pull the warhead toward it, the weapon's mass attracted to the gravitational anomaly the Ravagers had created. Sarah watched in horror as the missile's trajectory bent, carrying it away from the enemy ships and toward the tear in space itself. "No, no, no," Sarah muttered, realizing what would happen if a nuclear weapon detonated inside a partially formed portal. The explosion might not stop the Ravager's plan. It might make it worse, tearing a permanent hole between dimensions. Without conscious thought, Sarah threw the Ghosthawk into a screaming dive toward the missile. Her fighter's railgun spat tungsten slugs at maximum rate, trying to intercept the warhead before it reached the portal. Most of the rounds went wide, deflected by the warped space around the anomaly, but 3 slugs found their target. The nuclear warhead exploded prematurely, still outside the portal but close enough to the Ravager ships to accomplish Sarah's goal. The blast wave expanded outward in a perfect sphere of destruction, vaporizing 2 enemy vessels instantly and sending the others tumbling away from their formation. The organic network collapsed, the energy buildup dissipated, and the tear in space snapped shut with an almost audible twang. But Sarah was caught in the explosion's edge effects. The blast wave hit the Ghosthawk like a tsunami, sending the fighter spinning end over end through space. Emergency lights flashed across her cockpit as system after system failed, and Sarah fought to regain control of her tumbling ship. "Chen, respond." Commander Thex's voice cut through the static. "What's your status?" Sarah managed to stabilize the Ghosthawk's spin and assess the damage. It was extensive. Hull breaches in 3 compartments, fusion reactor operating at minimal power, life support failing, and half her control systems offline. But she was alive, and more importantly, the portal was gone. Portal neutralized, she reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Threat eliminated. Through her cracked cockpit canopy, Sarah could see the main battle turning in the Alliance's favor. With their special operation disrupted and their heavy cruiser crippled, the Ravager forces were withdrawing. Her squad mates, superior fighters, were making short work of the remaining enemy ships, their advanced weapons and shields proving devastatingly effective once the element of surprise was gone. "Incredible work, Chen," Commander Thek said, and Sarah could hear genuine admiration in his voice. "Though I have to ask, how did you know what they were planning?" Sarah smiled grimly as she nursed her damaged fighter back toward the convoy. "I didn't, sir. But when someone goes to that much trouble to position ships in a perfect geometric pattern, they're usually building something. And when Ravagers build something, it's never good for the Alliance." Lieutenant Vex's voice joined the comm channel, no longer carrying its usual mocking tone. "Chen, your ship, it shouldn't have been able to function in that energy field. Our sensors showed exotic radiation levels that would have fried any computer system." "That's the thing about primitive technology," Sarah replied, patting the Ghosthawk's scarred control panel affectionately. "Sometimes primitive means reliable. This old bird doesn't have enough sophisticated electronics to be disrupted by exotic energy fields. What you call obsolete, I call battle-tested." Pilot Zarn's four-armed form was visible through his fighter's canopy as he flew alongside the damaged Ghosthawk. "But how did you maneuver like that? The G-forces should have killed you and your ship should have broken apart." Sarah laughed, feeling the adrenaline finally beginning to fade. "We build things tough on Earth, and humans are tougher than we look. This fighter was designed to operate in Earth's gravity well, which is higher than most inhabited worlds. What seems like impossible maneuvering to you is just aggressive flying to me." As they escorted the convoy toward the safety of Alliance space, Sarah reflected on the day's events. Her squadmates had stopped their mocking and started asking genuine questions about human engineering and tactics. Commander Thex had already put her in for a commendation, and the diplomatic convoy was safe. But more than that, Sarah had proven something important not just to her squadmates but to herself. The Alliance had superior technology, better weapons, and more advanced ships. But sometimes the old ways worked precisely because they were old, because enemies stopped preparing for them, and because there was wisdom in simplicity. The Ghosthawk limped through space toward the repair facilities, its hull scarred but its pilot proud. Sarah Chen had flown into battle with a ship her squad mates considered obsolete, and she had saved the day precisely because of that perceived weakness. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. 3 days after the battle in the neutral zone, Sarah found herself standing in a very different hangar bay. This one belonged to the Alliance High Command, a massive space station that served as the military headquarters for a dozen star systems. The hangar was filled with the most advanced fighters from across the galaxy, ships that made even her squadmates' vessels look primitive by comparison. And right in the center, looking like a battered relic from a forgotten age, sat the Ghosthawk. "Lieutenant Chen," a crisp voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to see Admiral Korax approaching, the Volcari commander's reptilian features unreadable. Behind him walked a small entourage of officers from various Alliance species, all wearing expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Admiral," Sarah replied, snapping to attention. "At ease, Lieutenant. I've read Commander Thex's report of the engagement. Quite remarkable." The Admiral's scaled head tilted as he studied her. "Though I must admit, many of my staff find it difficult to believe that a single human fighter could accomplish what an entire squadron of advanced craft could not." Sarah could hear the challenge in his words. She had expected this. The Alliance military was built on technological superiority and careful tactical planning. The idea that primitive human engineering could succeed where their best technology failed threatened the fundamental assumptions that guided their strategy. "Sir, with respect, I think they're asking the wrong question," Sarah said carefully. Admiral Korax's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "They're wondering how primitive technology could be effective, but that's not what happened. What happened was that the Ravagers planned their attack based on what they expected to face: Alliance ships with predictable capabilities and limitations. They didn't plan for something completely different." One of the Admiral's staff officers, a tall Altarian with the bearing of a career academic, stepped forward. "Lieutenant, are you suggesting that technological inferiority is somehow an advantage? The mathematical models clearly show that advanced systems outperform primitive ones in every measurable category." Sarah smiled. "Professor, have you ever hunted?" The question clearly caught the Altarian off guard. "I beg your pardon?" "Hunting. Tracking and killing dangerous prey. On Earth, we've been doing it for millions of years." Sarah gestured toward the Ghosthawk. "When you hunt something that's bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than you are, you don't try to match its strengths. You use its strengths against it." She walked toward her fighter, running her hand along a section of hull that still bore scorch marks from the battle. The Ravagers expected Alliance fighters, ships that rely on shields, energy weapons, and computer-assisted flight. They built their defenses and tactics around countering those capabilities. But the Ghosthawk doesn't fight like an Alliance ship. Admiral Corax followed her, his expression thoughtful. "Continue." "Nuclear weapons bypass energy shields because they're not energy weapons, they're matter conversion. Kinetic projectiles are invisible to sensors designed to track particle beams. And manual flight control can't be predicted by computers because human pilots don't fly by mathematical optimization." The Admiral's staff was taking notes now, their earlier skepticism replaced by professional interest. Sarah could see them beginning to understand the implications. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "the Ghosthawk was built for Earth conditions. High gravity, dense atmosphere, extreme temperature variations. What seems like over-engineering to other species is just basic safety margins for human equipment. When space itself was being warped by exotic energies, my primitive ship held together because it was built to handle stress that would destroy more sophisticated designs." A new voice joined the conversation. "Fascinating theories, Lieutenant, but theories don't win wars." Sarah turned to see Captain Morrison approaching, another human, but one wearing the insignia of Alliance Fleet Intelligence. She had heard of Morrison but never met him. He was one of the few humans to reach high rank in Alliance Command, and rumor said he had done it by being more alien than the aliens. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Corax acknowledged. "I believe you wanted to observe this debrief?" Morrison nodded, his cold gaze fixed on Sarah. "I've been following Lieutenant Chen's career with interest. Her actions in the neutral zone were certainly dramatic, but I'm concerned about the message we're sending if we celebrate technological regression." Sarah felt her temper flare but kept her voice level. "Sir, I'm not advocating regression. I'm suggesting that diversity of capability is strategically valuable." "Diversity?" Morrison's laugh was harsh. "Lieutenant, Earth joined the Alliance because our technology was centuries behind theirs. We gained access to weapons, shields, and propulsion systems that our best scientists couldn't even understand. And you want to go backward?" "No, sir, I want to go forward, but not by abandoning everything that makes us human." Sarah gestured toward the Ghosthawk again. "This ship isn't just old technology. It's a different philosophy of engineering. Where Alliance ships prioritize efficiency and optimization, human ships prioritize durability and adaptability." Admiral Corax stepped between them before the argument could escalate further. "Captain Morris and Lieutenant Chen, you both raise valid points. But the question before us is practical, not philosophical. The Ravagers are adapting their tactics. Our intelligence suggests they're developing new weapons specifically designed to counter Alliance technology. If that's true, we may need alternative approaches." Morrison's expression darkened. "Admiral, surely you're not suggesting we revert to primitive human equipment based on one lucky engagement?" "I'm suggesting," the Admiral replied carefully, "that we evaluate all available options. Lieutenant Chen, how many human pilots could transition back to ships like the Ghosthawk if necessary?" Sarah considered the question. Most of her fellow humans had been eager to upgrade to Alliance fighters, seduced by their superior capabilities. The Ghosthawk program had been abandoned, its pilots retrained on alien technology. But some of the older veterans might remember their roots. With proper retraining, sir, maybe 24 pilots who still remember pre-Alliance tactics. But we'd need ships, and the Ghosthawk production line was shut down 3 years ago. "The specifications still exist," one of the Admiral's technical staff interjected. "And human industrial capacity could restart production if necessary." Captain Morrison looked appalled. "Admiral, this is madness. You're talking about equipping our pilots with inferior weapons to fight an enemy that's already adapting to our superior ones. The logical response is to develop even more advanced technology. not retreat to obsolete designs. Admiral Corax was quiet for a long moment, his reptilian features unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Captain Morrison, your concerns are noted. But the lieutenant has raised an important point about enemy expectations. Warfare is not just about technological capability. It's about psychology, surprise, and adaptation. The Admiral turned to Sarah. Lieutenant Chen, I'm authorizing you to develop a proposal for a mixed squadron. Alliance fighters operating alongside human designs. I want tactical analyses, equipment requirements, and training protocols. You'll have full access to our strategic databases and enemy intelligence. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. This was more than she had dared hope for. Sir, thank you. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't, but Lieutenant, the Admiral's voice carried a warning. This is not a vindication of human technology over Alliance systems. This is an experiment in tactical diversity. If your proposals don't show measurable strategic value, the project will be terminated immediately. Captain Morrison stepped forward again. Admiral, I must protest. Giving a junior officer access to classified strategic intelligence based on one anomalous engagement is my decision to make. Admiral Corax cut him off. Captain, you're welcome to submit your own analysis of conventional responses to evolving Ravager tactics. I want options, not ideology. As the meeting broke up and the various officers dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with the Ghosthawk once again. But now the scarred fighter looked different to her. It wasn't just a relic of human stubbornness anymore. It was the prototype for something new. Her wrist communicator chimed with an incoming message. Sarah glanced at the display and saw it was from Commander Thex. Chen, heard about your meeting with High Command. Wanted you to know the squadron's been talking. Half of them want to know more about human tactics, and the other half want to transfer to whatever unit you end up commanding. Thought you should know you've got support out here. Sarah smiled, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. The mockery and dismissal from her squad mates had hurt more than she wanted to admit. Knowing that she had earned their respect meant everything. But as she began mentally outlining her proposal for Admiral Corax, Sarah realized that the hardest part still lay ahead. She had proven that human technology could be effective in the right circumstances. Now she had to prove that it could be consistently effective, that it could be integrated with Alliance systems, and that pilots could be trained to use both approaches effectively. She also had to prove it before the Ravagers adapted to counter this new threat. Sarah climbed into the Ghosthawk's cockpit one more time, running through the familiar startup sequence. 6 months later, the hybrid squadron that would become known as the Ghost Wing was put to its first real test. Sarah stood in the briefing room of the battleship Resolute, watching her mixed unit of pilots prepare for what intelligence called the most dangerous mission of the war. The squadron was unlike anything the Alliance had ever fielded. 12 fighters total, 6 cutting-edge Alliance ships flown by her former squadmates, and 6 newly manufactured Ghosthawks crewed by human pilots who had been recalled from across the galaxy. The humans looked nervous in their bulky flight suits, while the alien pilots seemed fascinated by the crude-looking ships they would be flying alongside. Target is the Ravager shipyard complex in the Kepler system, Admiral Corax announced, his image appearing on the holographic display. Intelligence indicates they're building something new, a weapon specifically designed to counter Alliance technology. Your mission is to infiltrate the system, assess the threat, and if possible, destroy it before it becomes operational. Sarah studied the tactical display with growing concern. The shipyard was defended by 3 rings of defensive platforms, each one equipped with the latest Ravager technology. Automated weapon systems, energy barriers, and swarms of interceptor drones protected the facility from conventional attack. Sir, Lieutenant Vex asked, how are we supposed to penetrate those defenses? The automated systems alone would overwhelm a squadron our size. Admiral Corax's reptilian features showed what might have been a smile. That's where Lieutenant Chen's theories about enemy expectations become relevant. The Ravagers have spent months analyzing our previous tactics and upgrading their defenses accordingly. But they've never faced a mixed squadron. Commander Thex, now serving as Sarah's second-in-command, leaned forward. What's our approach vector? Sarah activated her own tactical display, highlighting a route through the system's asteroid field. We're going to split up. The Alliance fighters will approach from the primary vector, following standard attack protocols. That should trigger the automated defenses and draw their attention. "And the Ghosthawks?" asked Captain Morrison, who had been assigned as a tactical observer despite his obvious disapproval of the entire operation. "We'll come in from the asteroid field using passive sensors only. The Ravagers won't be scanning for chemical rockets and radio transmissions. They'll be looking for fusion signatures and quantum communications." Sarah traced the route with her finger. "By the time their sensors detect us, we'll already be inside their perimeter." Pilot Nira, her Zalani features thoughtful, raised a concern. "But how will you coordinate without quantum communications? The asteroids will block traditional radio signals." Sarah's smile was grim. "Line-of-sight laser communications and timed maneuvers. It's how human pilots coordinated for centuries before we had quantum entanglement transmitters. Simple, reliable, and completely undetectable by sensors designed to intercept quantum signals." The briefing continued for another hour, with each pilot receiving detailed instructions for their specific role. The Alliance fighters would create a dramatic diversion, showcasing their superior technology and drawing enemy fire. Meanwhile, the Ghosthawks would use stealth and misdirection to penetrate the facility's core. As the pilots dispersed to their ships, Captain Morrison approached Sarah with an expression of barely controlled skepticism. "Lieutenant, I want to go on record as saying this plan relies far too heavily on enemy incompetence." "If the Ravagers detect your approach, then we adapt," Sarah interrupted. "Captain, with respect, that's what human pilots do. We don't rely on perfect intelligence or optimal conditions. We improvise." Morrison's laugh was harsh. "Improvisation is just another word for poor planning, Lieutenant. I hope for everyone's sake that your human ingenuity is as effective as you claim." An hour later, Sarah was strapped into the Ghosthawk's familiar cockpit, leading her 5 human pilots through the asteroid field toward the Ravager facility. The passive sensors showed massive energy buildups as the defensive platforms powered up their weapons. Responding to the Alliance fighters' approach from the primary vector, "Ghost Leader, this is Vortex 1. Lieutenant Vex's voice crackled through the laser communication system. "We're engaging the outer perimeter. Looks like they're throwing everything they have at us. Copy, Vortex 1. Maintain the pressure. We're beginning our approach." Sarah switched to the squadron frequency and addressed her human pilots. "Ghostwing, remember your training. Manual flight only, passive sensors, radio silence except for emergencies. We're flying like our grandparents did." The 5 acknowledgments that came back were tense but professional. These pilots had been flying Alliance technology for years, and returning to human systems had been a difficult transition. But they were adapting, learning to trust their instincts instead of computer guidance. The Ghosthawks slipped between the asteroids like shadows, their matte black hulls absorbing sensor pings and their minimal heat signatures lost among the background radiation of space rocks. Sarah felt the familiar thrill of manual flight, her hands making constant tiny adjustments to keep the fighter on course without any computer assistance. "Ghost 2, she whispered into her helmet microphone. "Asteroid at bearing 27 Mark 15. Looks like it has sensor equipment attached." "Copy, Ghost Leader. I see it. Shall we take it out?" Sarah considered the tactical situation. Destroying the sensor platform would alert the Ravagers to their presence, but leaving it intact might allow the enemy to detect them anyway. This was exactly the kind of snap decision that computer systems couldn't make. It required human judgment. "Negative, Ghost 2. We go around. Wide loop. Use the asteroid's mass to mask our signatures." The detour added 10 minutes to their approach, but it kept them undetected. Sarah watched through her periscope as the battle raged around the facility's outer defenses. The Alliance fighters were putting on a spectacular show, their advanced weapons lighting up space as they engaged wave after wave of Ravager interceptors. But Sarah could see what the enemy couldn't. Her alien squadmates were holding back, not committing their full strength to the assault. They were saving their most devastating weapons for the second phase of the attack, when the Ghosthawks would need maximum distraction to reach their target. "Ghost Leader, we're approaching the shipyard," reported Ghost 3. "I'm seeing the target structure on visual." Sarah's blood ran cold as she got her first clear look at what the Ravagers were building. The structure was massive, larger than any ship in the Alliance fleet, but it clearly wasn't designed for space travel. It was a weapon platform, bristling with exotic energy projectors and what looked like dimensional manipulation devices. "Control. This is Ghost Leader." She transmitted back to the Resolute using a tight beam laser. Target confirmed. It's not a ship. It's a space-based weapon capable of projecting force across interstellar distances. If they complete construction, they could attack any Alliance world from here. Admiral Corax's response was immediate. Understood, Ghost Leader. Primary objective is now destruction of that facility. Authorization code Alpha 77. Use any means necessary. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. Alpha 77 was authorization for tactical nuclear weapons. The Admiral was giving her permission to use the Ghosthawk's most destructive armament to ensure the weapon platform's destruction. Ghostwing, you heard the Admiral. We're going nuclear. Set warheads for maximum yield and coordinate targeting. I want that thing vaporized. But as the Ghosthawks approached their attack positions, Sarah realized they had a problem. The weapon platform was protected by an energy barrier, unlike anything in the Alliance databases. The field seemed to bend space around the structure, creating a pocket of distorted reality that might deflect or absorb their nuclear warheads. Ghost Leader, called Ghost 5, my sensors are going crazy near that barrier. I don't think conventional weapons will penetrate it. Sarah studied the tactical situation and made a decision that would have horrified any Alliance tactician. Ghostwing, new plan. We're going to ram it. The shocked silence that followed her announcement spoke volumes. Even the most desperate human tactics rarely involve deliberate collisions with enemy targets. Sir, Ghost 2 finally managed. Our ships won't survive impact with that barrier. No, Sarah agreed. But our nuclear warheads will. We set them for proximity detonation and ride them in manually. The barrier is designed to stop projectiles and energy beams, not piloted missiles traveling at ramming speed. It was insane, suicidal, and completely against every tactical doctrine the Alliance had ever developed. But it was also exactly the kind of desperate human tactic that the Ravagers would never anticipate. And sometimes, Sarah thought as she armed her warhead and pushed the Ghosthawk toward maximum velocity, being unpredictable was worth any risk.